Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today. Researchers have uncovered evidence that members of a mysterious human species buried their dead and carved symbols on cave walls long before the earliest evidence of burials by modern humans. The brains belonged to the extinct species known as Homo Naledi, and they were around 1/3 the size of a modern human brain. In a moment, Michael Cremo with us. We'll talk about this case and much more on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Michael Cremo back with us, known as the Forbidden Archaeologist, hailed as a groundbreaking research pioneer and international authority on archaeological anomalies. His best-selling books, Forbidden Archaeology, first published back in 1993, already translated into at least 26 languages, challenged the very foundation of the Darwinian evolution. Michael's websites are all linked up at coasttocoastam.com, and we're going to talk about this case of the Homo Naledi. Michael, what are these people?
Well, they're a hominin, a species related to human beings. They were found in South Africa. The first fossils were discovered in 2013 at the Rising Star Cave in South Africa. It's part of a United Nations site called the Cradle of Humanity, because they believe the first humans appeared in that part of the world there. So these were found in a cave that's very difficult to get into. There's a very narrow opening to the chamber in this Rising Star Cave, and they had to recruit small archaeologists
to get in there.
They were all women, 6 of them, who are very tall and, well, very small, because it's only 7 inches wide, the entrance through the rock that goes down to this. So they went there and they found about 1,500 of this creature they called Homo Naledi. Naledi is an African word for star. So it's kind of related to the Rising Star Cave that they were found in. As you were mentioning previously, they're a bit of an anomaly because they have a brain about 1/3 the size of a modern human brain. And scientists had been thinking that a large brain is necessary for the intelligence to do something like deliberately bury a member of your species. I mean, you were mentioning a lady in Ecuador who was going to be buried, but kind of woke up in her coffin. But scientists think that deliberately burying a member of your own species is something that only humans like us do. So, and they thought the oldest burial that they were aware of was about 78,000 years old, and it was carried out in a place in Kenya, a site in Kenya, which is also in Africa there. So to have this kind of behavior, deliberately burying members of your own species in a kind of ritual, is something they didn't expect at 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, which is over 100,000 years older than the oldest burials that they were aware of at that time.
And Michael, the
So,
brain is only a third the size of a modern human. What does that tell you?
well, it tells you that intelligence may not be the result of brain activity. The brain is just part of the picture. I think consciousness and mind and intelligence, they also have to be considered as perhaps having an origin beyond the brain.
Do these kind of stories, Michael, vindicate you? Because you have for years been talking on this program specifically about how old humans are, that we go way, way back, much farther back than what modern science thinks. Does these kind of stories vindicate you?
I think they do. Another thing they vindicate is the idea of the coexistence of different hominin species. In other words, these creatures, these small-brained creatures, existed from about 330,000 years ago to 230,000 years ago. And many scientists today think that the first humans like us came into existence about 300,000 years ago. So that means that these small-brained creatures were coexisting with humans like us for vast periods of time. And not only Homo naledi, but Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthals coexisted with us. The Denisovans coexisted with us. So we first proposed that in forbidden archaeology some years ago, and now modern science, which used to believe there was only one hominin species existing at a time, has come around to the view in forbidden archaeology that there is coexistence of hominin types, and that the coexistence goes very far back in time.
What do you think the Homo naledi looked like? Like a human, smaller maybe?
Well, not exactly human, because they were small, a maximum of about 5 feet high. They were relatively thin in structure, and their arms were adapted for life in the trees. They had an upward pointing shoulder joint, and then they had very curved, long fingers like apes that live in the trees.
Yeah.
So they weren't perfectly adapted for life on the ground.
Were they more ape-like, Michael, as opposed to human?
Well, if you spend a lot of time swinging from your arms in trees, I think that's not quite what we identify as human.
Right, unless you're Tarzan or something.
There are creatures, however, like the Neanderthals, that some people say, some scientists have said, if you shaved them and put a suit on them and put them out in the street in New York, they'd pass. You wouldn't be able to tell that they weren't human.
Interesting.
But I think this Homo naledi is a little bit different than that, a little more obviously ape-like.
And you think Naledi is at least 300,000 years old?
Well, that's what they are now claiming. Initially, when they discovered them, they thought they were between 1 and 2 million years ago. But scientists came in and did some dating on the materials that were found there. They were using a dating method called the uranium-thorium method, and they got this younger date for them. But this is, in terms of their evolutionary understanding, it's a complete mystery where they came from. They're classified in the genus Homo, but they don't know when they split off from the other Homo species. Like the oldest Homo species that they have is Homo habilis, who existed maybe 2 million years ago. So they're thinking, did it kind of split off from them 2 million years ago? Or did it split off in more recent times, maybe from Homo erectus about 1 million years ago, or for some other more recent human Homo species?
Michael, do apes or monkeys bury their dead at all?
I have not heard any reports like that. I haven't seen them. So generally, scientists believe that it's something only humans like us did.
Okay.
And this creature, Homo naledi, apparently buried its dead. Why do they say that? Because in the cave where the bones of this creature were found, there were the bones of no other type of animal. Because like in a cave, sometimes you could say, well, some bones got washed in a flood, or they fell down from some higher level, but only the bones of this creature were found in this cave. And that indicated that the bodies were brought into the cave by members of their own species. So that's kind of unusual. I think it's pretty good logic.
And what's interesting, too, is burials are generally compared to religions or spirituality. I wonder if these creatures had any religion or spirituality with them.
Well, that's a great question. I would say it's entirely possible, but one thing that indicated that was that in the cave, there are carvings on the wall next to the burial places. Whoever put those bones there made carvings.
Almost like tombstones.
Yeah, something like that. So that kind of indicates they had some ritual purpose. They were carrying out some kind of ritual. Now, some will say, no, they were just getting rid of, bodies that were rotting in their place where they were living, and they just wanted to get rid of them. It's not any belief in an afterlife. But I think Lee Berger, who is one of the scientists that's leading the project, has said you can't rule that out.
No, you really can't.
I kind of agree with him there.
Now, what was the significance of the Rising Star Cave, the burial ground?
Well, it's that was the name of the cave, and that's one reason why they called it the creature Homo naledi. There's an African language called Sesotho, and Naledi means star in that language. So that's the connection with the Homo naledi and the Rising Star Cave.
That's truly remarkable, Michael.
Yeah, that's part of a larger complex of caves where important discoveries have been made of Australopithecus and other types of hominins like that. The Sterkfontein caves, for example. I've been to that site myself. I've been to that Cradle of Humanity site. Of course, it was some years before the Homo naledi discoveries were made, but there was a creature called Littlefoot that was discovered there. Yeah, we hear about Bigfoot sometimes. So
right.
They called this one Littlefoot. It was an Australopithecus who had small but very human-like feet. So that was found there. And it's kind of interesting that one of the scientists involved in some of the discoveries at the cradle of humanity, a man named J.T. Robinson, brought a psychic there to help him in his research, a psychic named Jeffrey Hodgson. And that's not very well known. So you've kind of got you were mentioning a spiritual connection perhaps with the burials. One way to detect that might be with methods that go beyond the normal methods that scientists use. The scientist J.T. Robinson brought a psychic, and he put him lying on his back in the Sterkfontein caves, and he would place a fossil on his forehead, and this psychic would be able to envision what the creature to which that bone belonged was doing, millions of years ago. So I think that's a whole area that needs to be explored, and maybe we can get an answer to your question in that way.
In your work, Michael, and you've done a lot, you've come across a lot of interesting, strange stories. How would you categorize this one?
Well, this is very interesting because it shows, if we take seriously what the investigators have found, and these are people from University of the Witwatersrand. The work is being funded by National Geographic, so they're kind of mainstream, and they're coming up with these things that, maybe they were burying their dead. They were doing it in a ritualistic way. They were giving symbols, making symbols on the walls to kind of say something about these burials. It's really kind of interesting to me. It's kind of fascinating in that regard. And who knows, maybe they really are as old as they initially thought. 1 or 2 million years. That has to be looked at. And the very fact that they are saying that this pushes anatomically modern human behavior, in other words, deliberate burials and use of symbols to indicate some kind of ritualistic function that went on, is well, it's kind of like music to my ears because it's pushing things back in time, which has been going on for a long time. When I first came out with Forbidden Archaeology, they were saying humans are 100,000 years old, and 10 years later they were saying 200,000. Now they're saying 300,000. I think they're going in the right direction, but they've got a long way to go.
That's right. They're getting closer to your numbers, though, aren't they?
Yeah, they're getting close to the numbers. They're pushing the anatomy back. They're pushing the culture back further and further in time. And I think eventually they'll come even closer to what I believe the actual case is.
The fact that they have these carved symbols on those cave walls tells me some degree of intelligence, consciousness, some ability to reason and have emotion. Yeah.
I think science is gradually coming around to the fact that they have to deal with consciousness. You can't just dismiss it, say it's a byproduct of bioelectrical activity in the brain. They're starting to see it's not reducible to brain chemistry. It's got its own independent existence. And therefore you have huge conferences now of scientists who are studying consciousness in different ways, and they've had to admit, we thought, 20 or 30 years ago that we'd be able to explain how it comes from matter in the brain, but 20 or 30 years later, they have to admit, well, we haven't done it yet, and we're not any closer to having done it than we were 20 or 30 years ago. So that's one of the issues that comes up. These discoveries, they kind of point beyond the stones and bones to other types of phenomenon, mental and consciousness-related phenomenon that cry out for explanation, and the current attempts aren't really working out. So I think they're going to have to change some fundamental concepts they have about the nature of reality.
Michael, would this species, Homo naledi, have existed with modern humans at the same time?
Well, according to their current theories, yes. And I would say the only difference I would have, they were coexisting, because they say these Homo naledi specimens from the Rising Star Cave go back about 300,000, they say 330,000 years or so. They say humans like us, according to their current understanding, go back about 300,000 years. So that means Homo naledi was coexisting with the first human beings, which they think also emerged in Africa. And humans have existed from 300,000 years ago to the present, and they think this Homo naledi coexisted with them from about 300,000 years ago to 200,000 years ago, and then apparently went extinct. But I don't think we have a really complete inventory of every creature that lives on Earth today. There are lots of creatures out there that people believe exist, like Bigfoot and Sasquatch,
Sure,
and the Yeti, and things like that. So maybe they're still around somewhere.
Is it possible, Michael, that this creature, these species, might be extraterrestrial?
Well, I definitely think that has to be considered as well. And I say that for two reasons. First of all, it's what people actually observe. Contactees and abductees, other persons who are involved in the ET phenomenon, they're always speaking about there's the Nordics and the Greys and the Venusians and there's a lot of different types of extraterrestrial beings. And ancient wisdom sources like the Vedic teachings of ancient India say there are hundreds of thousands of human-like species scattered throughout the cosmos. So that's, whether we're talking about the information that comes from ancient wisdom traditions or the information that comes to us from modern researchers, they're adding up to the same thing, that we're not alone in the universe, and it's not that there's just one human species. There can be many human-like species.
On a 1 to 10 scale, Michael, with 10 being fantastic, how would you categorize this discovery?
I categorize it as, for me, personally, if you're asking me, a 7, which means it's not the most astonishing thing, but it's high up on the list.
It's interesting and fascinating, but there have been others that have been more.
Well, or I would hope that more will come. I think things have been discovered, but if we're talking things that are accepted by the mainstream, I think this is, for the mainstream, it's a very significant one, and they're kind of resisting
Right.
some of it. There are some critics from the mainstream who say these aren't deliberate burials. There's no ritual involved in it. The bones have just somehow or other congregated together in little depressions in the floor of the cave, and nobody dug a grave, and you get that kind of feedback from people who are, I don't know what their motive is really. Maybe they just don't like the implication, the spiritual, the indication of some kind of spirituality among these creatures, that they were aware of the afterlife and had a ritual for sending the souls of the deceased individuals to some higher place.
That's pretty dramatic. Michael Cremo with us. His books are still available, Human Devolution, Forbidden Archaeology, and his website, mcremo.com, linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Michael, I know this is speculation, but what remains to be discovered out there? What do you think?
Well, I think what I've been able to document is just the tip of the iceberg. If we're talking about evidence for extreme human antiquity, I think we have to consider we haven't really looked at the whole Earth. We've excavated in a few places, but it's been the evidence that's been discovered has been subjected to what I call knowledge filtration. So we're not getting all the facts, all the discoveries that have been made. We're only getting the ones that fit the current paradigm. Those are the ones you find in the textbooks. But I think we have to look beyond the textbooks. And when we do that, we find quite a bit. And I think there's quite a bit more that remains to be uncovered. And that's true not just in terms of archaeology. I think it's also in terms of the UFO phenomenon, the consciousness phenomenon. Mm-hmm. I think there's a whole lot that needs to come out. And when it does, it's going to mean some big changes in the way that we look at the world and organize our societies.
And it's long overdue, Michael, isn't it?
I believe it is.
Let's take some calls for you. Joe, Long Island, New York, east of the Rockies, to get us started. Hey, Joe, go ahead.
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I have two questions. The second's on Egypt. But my first question is, we share supposedly 75% of our genetics with a dog, 93% with a monkey. And, when you see behavior of people where, for example, at least 7 people went over Niagara Falls in a barrel, you do wonder if there's a genetic anomaly where people would do something like that, where the behavior would not be checked and balanced, where this is a little bit insane to do this. So that would be my one question. Are there genetic anomalies? And my second question would be about ancient Egypt and stuff that seems to be carried forward right into the present from ancient Egypt. Now, for example, you have that deity Pan, and that was carried forward into Pan American Airlines, which supposedly, the idea of Pan covering everywhere, South America, North America, and the Panama Canal. So how much of what's going on now has been kind of brought forward from ancient Egypt in terms of, verbiage and beliefs?
Let's take that one first, Michael.
Well, Egypt is a very popular destination, and people go there to be inspired by the really inexplicably advanced technology that was necessary to construct the things that have been seen there. like the pyramids, it's still a mystery how they were put together, and
That's
what their
right.
actual purpose wasn't understood, isn't very well understood, and how they were able to do stonework, where they have stone boxes carved with perfect right angles, 90-degree angles, cuts in them. It's really quite amazing. So they had a civilization at that time that, from the records that have been left, incorporated a picture of reality that included consciousness and spirit and extraterrestrial beings and all types of things like that we currently don't recognize, and I think our civilization is suffering because of it. So, in terms of history, there are Egyptian pharaoh lists that go back hundreds of thousands of years. So I think there's something there that can be very helpful for our understanding of our current world.
And also, he was wanting to know about genetic anomalies, if they are
Genetic
out there.
anomalies. What the relationship between genetics and behavior is not very well understood. There may be some link there, but I think there's more to a human being than chemistry. I think that's part of the picture. We have a body that has chemical elements as its structure. Proteins are made of different molecules of different elements. So that's part of what we are. But I think we have a mental body as well, which can be influenced not just by genetics, but by different energies. And some personalities, they get attracted by certain energies that result in the kinds of destructive behaviors that you're talking about. So if somebody keeps in contact with that type of energy, energy of darkness, illusion, chaos, then they may do the kinds of things that you were talking about. But if someone is able to maintain contact with more positive energies and put that kind of energy out, they're going to be better off. They won't be doing those kind of self-destructive things.
Michael, let's go back to the beginning. How did you get involved with this kind of work and research?
Well, I think I've always had, as far back as I can remember, even into childhood, I've had a sense of wanting to know what the truth is about things, even on a very, very simple level. I've always been interested, what's really going on here? And I think I've also always had a sense of justice, wanting to be treated fairly myself and see others treated fairly as well. So I think everybody has to analyze what their core values are, because that's going to determine a lot of the way in which we behave in the world. So I think I've always had core values like that. And in terms of what more directly inspired the path I've taken is that I think I always had some inner sense that there's more to reality than what's being currently available to me, that I want to push the boundaries a little bit. So I've always had a tendency like that. And that's led me into a spiritual path that comes from the Vedic tradition of India because I found it satisfied a lot of those core values that I have. Of course, everyone has to find their own way in this world. So those are some of the factors that have led me on this search for truth, even if it doesn't correspond to the conventionally accepted ideas that are out there in society. It would be nice to live in a time when your core beliefs are shared by all the elites in the society that you're part of. But sometimes we don't have that luxury, and we have to go our own way.
Let's go to Thomas in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Welcome to the show. Hey, Tom, go ahead.
Okay, George. I have a question for your guest.
Sure.
I had heard archaeologists found a six-toed, six-fingered sloth. They coined the name Maria for her in South America somewhere. I can't remember where it was. I was hoping to catch your guest's opinion on the connection between panspermia, evolution, and Maria.
Okay, panspermia is the idea that life didn't originate on Earth. I think Francis Crick, one of the co-discoverers of the spiral structure of
came in on
DNA.
comets and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. He he figured out that you can't really explain its origin in terms of the Earth. There isn't enough time, for it to have happened by random interaction of chemicals. So he suggested this idea of panspermia, maybe that it happened a long, long time ago somewhere else in the cosmos, and the Earth has been seeded. And some people combine that with the idea of panpsychism, that life, can't be explained just by chemicals. They have to assume that matter on some level is conscious. And that's what gives the appearance of life forms on Earth. So there are ideas like that. I don't know if does that answer your question?
I was wondering if perhaps you could connect that to archaeologists have found a six-toed, six-fingered sloth mummified somewhere in South America, and I was hoping to get your opinion on her connection between panspermia and evolution of the human race.
Okay. I believe that there is extraterrestrial intervention that results in our human-like form here. But this goes back to the idea that ultimately, as a conscious, personal, individual self, which we all are, we're all conscious, we're all individual, we're all personal. None of us are from here. We're from some other place, some realm of pure consciousness. When we come to the alien world of matter, we need vehicles in which to function here. Like normally I walk around on the land. If I want to exist in an alien element like water, I need a vehicle like a submarine or a diving suit to get around here. And where does it come from? It comes from engineers who understand if I want to live under the water, I got to have a machine like that. So that's where our bodies come from. The seeds for our bodily vehicles come from an extraterrestrial source. So you could say that there's a source for that panspermia that gives us our human form, in which we can ask questions like this and try to understand the answers.
What is the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site? What is that?
Well, that's a place in South Africa. It's kind of north of Johannesburg. It's where they have some some sites that have been very important in the modern scientific picture of human origins, like the Sterkfontein caves that I was mentioning earlier. You know, I've been to this World Heritage Site, the Cradle of Humanity, and when you go there, you go into a museum, and the first thing you see is an exhibit that tries to answer the question, discover yourself. What are you? And the answer it gives is very materialistic. You know, it quotes one scientist who said, "We are purely material beings. We're robot vehicles programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes." You know, so it's a very dark picture of what our identity is. So it's kind of I don't know if I would really call it the cradle of humanity. I'd call it kind of the cradle of materialism or something like that. But it's still a very interesting place. I've been in the Sterkfontein caves there, where discoveries of Australopithecus were made. So that's what the cradle of humanity is. The United Nations World Heritage Site in South Africa.
Michael, if we take Adam and Eve out of the equation for a moment, then the religious connotations tied into that, how did the first human beings come, and where did they come from? I mean, what were their parents like?
I don't know if it's possible to take out the first male and female human beings. I would say, because it's a big mystery where that came from, that method of reproduction.
I mean, would they have come from Neanderthal and they just evolved or something like that? Cro-Magnon men?
I think it's important to understand, from my point of view, that any body, whether it's a male body, a female body, a human body, a Neanderthal body, a plant body, an animal body, it's a vehicle for a soul, a conscious self. That's what it is. And among the different kinds of vehicles, the human one is the most important one, because it's in the human vehicle that we have the opportunity to ask the kinds of questions we're talking about and try to understand the answers and really solve the problems of human existence, the chief of which are we're in temporary vehicles that will come into existence at one point in time and go out of existence at one point in time. That's the main difficulty that we have on this level of reality. But the conscious self doesn't have to be in that situation. It can be in a situation where it's existing without any threat of having to change its body or come in existence or go out of existence. It just always is.
Let's talk more about that, Michael. And I definitely have to ask you the question about the chicken or the egg, and then we'll take final calls. And we're back with Michael Cremo. His website is his name, linked up at coasttocoastam.com for you. Michael, we'll take final calls, but that age-old question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? How do we answer that?
From my point of view, nothing is really created. You know, the form of the human species, the form, they're existing always. And they're sometimes manifest, sometimes not. Because I think on the larger scale of the cosmos, it's coming into existence, there's a cycle that there are times when the cosmos is contracted and everything in it is dormant and in a sleeping state. And when the cosmos reawakens again, then everything in it wakes up, and it's the appropriate bodily vehicles are there for the conscious selves within that universe, and there are millions and millions of universes as well. So the forms and everything are always there. They're always available. They just come into a dormant state and an awakened state, just endlessly. So there's no creation, ultimately.
So you're always saying that the chicken was always there?
The chicken was always there. The egg was always there. The form of it.
The human was always there?
The human form was always there.
Interesting. Mary in New Jersey. Take it away, Mary.
Hello. Don't laugh. This is my imagination.
We'll never laugh at you, Mary.
All right. So all the way back when God first created Adam, before he made the garden, before he placed him in the garden, I could just picture God making vehicles for Adam to ride with him, to show him his creation, to take him, all through the universe. He's teaching him. I don't know how long that would take, how many years that would take, but constantly teaching. And maybe Adam had a companion like a chimp, and he was close to him. And, they imitate. He's still an animal, but they imitate. But Adam's human. He has to be protected. He has to breathe air and all. So he's in a vehicle that God creates just for teaching, showing him, this is his creation. He's showing him everything there is, to show. And then eventually he makes that garden, and he plunks him down in there. And again, he's teaching him how to take care of the garden and whatever. So I don't know how many years that would take, millions of years, I don't know, before Eve ever came on the scene.
What do you think of Mary's theory, Michael? Go ahead.
That gets back to this question of male, female. And in terms of modern science, they think in the beginning there was just chemicals. And they say somehow or other the chemicals got together and formed some first reproducing organism, like an amoeba or a bacteria or something like that. But those single-celled creatures, they reproduce just by splitting in half. That's how they reproduce. There's no male and no female. How that male and female thing got started is an unsolved mystery in biology. How you go from cells just splitting in half to reproduce a daughter cell or whatever, and how you get multicellular creatures with male and female genders reproducing in the way that they do is not understood. I think it requires something more than they've been able to contribute in order to understand that. I think the way to understand it is that on a higher level of reality, those things are there eternally, and they get reflected down to our level of reality in some way. In other words, as above, so below.
So below, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I think that got started. So I think it says in the Bible something about male and female. He created them, the different animals. Yeah. So but the thing that I would add is that has happened more than once. It's happened again and again and again and again. So ultimately, there's no beginning to it. It's always been going on. I know that's a very challenging idea, but I think that's what it adds up to.
All right, back to the calls. Bill in Gulf Manor, Ohio, east of the Rockies. Hey, Bill, go ahead.
Hi there.
Hi.
From DNA studies, they've come to the conclusion that the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals weren't, the Cro-Magnons didn't come in and slaughter the Neanderthals and replace them, that there was interaction to the extent that 5 to 14% of our modern DNA is of Neanderthal origin. I was wondering if the other hominid species you mentioned might have also interacted and contributed DNA to us.
I think they have identified a Denisovan contribution to the modern human genome in some places. But again, I'm just going to make the point that there's more to a human being than DNA. And even how, every human being starts from a single fertilized egg, and it begins to divide into 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. And actually, it divides millions and millions of times, so that there are several trillion cells in the human body. That's what our body is made up of, trillions of cells of different kinds. So how each cell knows what it is, that I'm a blood cell, that I'm a neuron cell in the brain, that I'm a muscle cell in the foot, I'm a toenail cell, I'm this or that, that's not very well understood. So there's more that going on than just the DNA, because each cell has the same DNA in it. How it knows what it's supposed to do in that whole organization of trillions of cells is not understood.
Not at all. Let's go to Barry in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Well, hello there, stranger.
Hello there, George. Boy, oh boy, what it is a pleasure to be able to speak with you and your guest tonight. It is so right on, George, with my biochemistry background the way it is. I was just telling Tommy, and before I tell you this, hello all my buddies out there in Coast to Coast land, from Wayne and Corny and all the boys. I just love you to death. And I told Martha, I said, hell, I can't die. Everybody on Coast to Coast will miss me.
We would.
But anyway, I've got a theory, being a scientist myself. I think that the planet Earth, George, is a giant science experiment. I think that some other superior group of humans that are more advanced than us have discovered another planet to live on, and that our relatives are living there in the future on this new planet.
Well, if you look at the theory of Zecharia Sitchin, a group of extraterrestrials came here called the Anunnaki and created us. Michael, can you rule that out?
I definitely think that there's extraterrestrial involvement in the origin of our anatomically modern human body here. I mean, that's something I would have in common with Zecharia Sitchin. I would just say the intervention happened a long time ago, longer than he said. But, and I would also include this idea that the conscious self that operates in this human vehicle has an extraterrestrial origin itself. None of us as conscious beings are from this level of reality. And as far as what the caller said, that maybe we're an experiment could be that we're in a virtual reality system. Yeah, we're in a simulated...
Like a matrix?
Yeah.
There are some that believe that. Elon Musk believes that. We're in a simulation.
Yeah, and you wouldn't really know it unless the simulator kind of put some clues in there. And I think there are.
Let's go to Aaron in Fountain Valley, California, west of the Rockies. Hey, Aaron, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to talk to you, Michael. I think that people have been living on this planet a long time and suffering like asteroid impacts, like extinction level events.
We've had many of those, Michael, haven't we?
Yeah, that's correct. And another interesting thing about asteroid and comet impacts is that they can be evidence for extreme human antiquity. Like in Australia, they have meteor impacts, craters, and some of the impact craters are millions of years old. Yet the people, the native people, the Aboriginal people, Aboriginal tribes that live near those craters, they have in their legends that a star fell from the sky and hit the ground here. And this is, they've had these stories from before the time that modern science recognized these craters as impact craters. They thought they were volcanic. So that's kind of interesting. But I agree with you. According to the Vedic literature, there have been 6 major extinction events in the history of the Earth. And according to modern science, there have been 6 major extinction events, after which most of the life forms have disappeared and the Earth had to be repopulated.
And let's hope there are no more extinction events, Michael.
I think we're in the midst of one right now.
Do you?
Well, some scientists have pointed out that many species are disappearing.
Well, that's true. Insects and animals and things like that.
Frogs. And so many species are on the endangered list now. It's kind of the human species has had a big impact on this planet and the creatures living on it.
Michael, your book's still available?
Yes, you were kind enough to mention that my website is linked to Coast. So if people wish to look at the books, they can go to my website, mcremo.com, and of course they're available elsewhere too, but it's nice that people get them from the website because we can offer them some special gifts.
Super. Michael Cremo's website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Thank you, Michael. Always a pleasure talking to you on the show. I always look forward to it. The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.